Republican presidential debate here at the Venetian, Las Vegas. The war against ISIS will pose many new challenges for the next commander-in-chief. The last two presidents pursued a Middle East policy that supported toppling dictators to try to promote democracy. Senator Cruz, you have said the world would be safer today if Saddam Hussein were still in power in Iraq, Muammar Gaddafi ruled Libya, and Hosni Mubarak ruled Egypt. So would it be your policy to preserve dictatorships rather than promoting democracy in the Middle East?
Well, if I believe in an America-first foreign policy, that far too often President Obama and Hillary Clinton, and unfortunately more than a few Republicans, have gotten distracted from the central focus of keeping this country safe. So let's go back to the beginning of the Obama administration, when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama led NATO in toppling the government in Libya. And they did it because they wanted to promote democracy. A number of Republicans supported them. The result of that, and we were told then that there were these moderate rebels that would take over. Well, the result is Libya is now a terrorist war zone run by jihadists. Move over to Egypt. Once again, the Obama administration, encouraged by Republicans, toppled Mubarak, who had been a reliable ally of the United States, of Israel, and in its place, Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood came in, a terrorist organization. And we need to learn from history. These same leaders, Obama, Clinton, and far too many Republicans, want to topple Assad. Assad is a bad man. Gaddafi was a bad man. Mubarak had a terrible human rights record, but they were assisting us, at least Gaddafi and Mubarak, in fighting radical Islamic terrorists. And if we topple Assad, the result will be ISIS will take over Syria, and it will worsen U.S. national security interests. And the approach, instead of being a Woodrow Wilson democracy promoter, we ought to hunt down our enemies and kill ISIS rather than creating opportunities for ISIS to take control of new countries.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Rubio. You supported the removal of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Now that country is in turmoil as ISIS is clearly growing there. Senator Cruz says you haven't learned your lesson. Do you have any regrets for supporting President Obama's intervention in Libya?
To begin with, Muammar Gaddafi and the revolt against Gaddafi was not started by the United States. It was started by the Libyan people. And the reason why I argue we needed to get involved is because he was going to go one way or the other. And my argument then was proven true, and that is the longer that civil war took, the more militias would be formed, and the more unstable the country would be after the fact. As far as Muammar Gaddafi is concerned, by the way, Muammar Gaddafi is the man that killed those Americans over Lockerbie, Scotland. Muammar Gaddafi is also the man that bombed that cafe in Berlin and killed those Marines. And you want to know why Muammar Gaddafi started cooperating on his nuclear program? Because we got rid of Saddam Hussein. And so he got scared that he would be next, and that's why he started cooperating. Look, we will have to work around the world with less than ideal governments. The government in Saudi Arabia is not a democracy, but we will have to work with them. The government in Jordan is not perfect, but we will have to work with them. But anti-American dictators like Assad, who help Hezbollah, who help get those IEDs into Iraq, if they go, I will not shed a tear.
Senator Cruz?
Well, it's more than not shedding a tear. It's actively getting involved to topple a government. And we keep hearing from President Obama and Hillary Clinton and Washington Republicans that they're searching for these mythical moderate rebels. It's like a purple unicorn. They never exist. These moderate rebels end up being jihadists. And I'll tell you whose view on Assad is the same as mine. It's Prime Minister Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said Israel doesn't have a dog in that fight because Assad is a puppet of Iran, a Shia radical Islamic terrorist, but at the same time, Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't want to see Syria governed by ISIS, and we need to focus on American interests, not on global aspirations.
Everybody stand by for a moment. Governor Kasich, go ahead.
I don't understand this thing about Assad. He has to go. Assad is aligned with Iran and Russia. The one thing we want to prevent is we want to prevent Iran being able to extend a Shia crescent all across the Middle East. Assad's got to go, and there are moderates there. There are moderates in Syria, who we should be supporting. I do not support a civil war. I don't want to be policeman of the world, but we can't back off of this. And let me tell you, at the end, the Saudis have agreed to put together a coalition inside of Syria to stabilize that country. He must go. It will be a blow to Iran and to Russia.
We're going to talk about Assad in a moment. Mr. Trump, are Americans safer with dictators running the world in the Middle East?
In my opinion,
go ahead, Mr. Trump.
In my opinion, we've spent $4 trillion trying to topple various people that, frankly, if they were there and if we could have spent that $4 trillion in the United States to fix our roads, our bridges, and all of the other problems, our airports, and all of the other problems we have, we would have been a lot better off. I can tell you that right now. We have done a tremendous disservice, not only to the Middle East, we've done a tremendous disservice to humanity. The people that have been killed, the people that have been wiped away, and for what? It's not like we had victory. It's a mess. The Middle East is totally destabilized, a total and complete mess. I wish we had the $4 trillion or $5 trillion. I wish it was spent right here in the United States on our schools, hospitals, roads, airports, and everything else that are all falling apart.
Thank you.
That is exactly what President Obama said.
Go ahead.
That's exactly what President Obama has said. I'm amazed to hear that from a Republican presidential candidate. But let's just start. Let's just start with who got it wrong. Who really got it wrong? Hillary Clinton has gotten every foreign policy challenge wrong. The gimmicky red reset button with Vladimir Putin. Recall that she called Bashar al-Assad a positive reformer, and then she opened an embassy. And then later she said over and over and over again, Bashar al-Assad must go, although she wasn't prepared to do anything about it. Recall that Hillary Clinton was all for toppling Muammar Gaddafi, then didn't listen to her own people on the ground. And of course, when she lied about the terrorist attack in Benghazi, she invited more terrorist attacks.
Thank you. Mr. Trump.
Well, there's nothing to respond to. People feel differently. I mean, the fact is Benghazi was a disaster because of Libya. Everything just fell into place. It could not have been worse. What do we have now? We have nothing. We've spent $3 trillion and probably much more. They have no idea what we spent. Thousands and thousands of lives. We have nothing. Wounded warriors all over the place who I love. We have nothing for it. And by the way, and Ben said, and correctly, and I'm not saying this is a knock, because this is one of the finest men. You're not going to find a finer man. But I've been talking about oil for 3 years. I've been saying, take the oil, take the oil. I didn't say just bomb it. I said take it and use it and distribute it so that the wounded warriors and people. But I've been saying this now for many years. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's saying take the oil. It wasn't so fashionable to take the oil 6 months ago. I've been saying it for years.
Dr. Carson, is the Middle East, Dr. Carson, is the Middle East better off with dictators?
No one is ever better off with dictators, but there comes a time, you know, when you're on an airplane, they always say, in case of an emergency, oxygen mask will drop down, put yours on first, and then administer help to your neighbor. We need oxygen right now, and we need to start thinking about the needs of the American people before we go and try to solve everybody else's problems. The fact of the matter is the Middle East has been in turmoil for thousands of years. For us to think that we're going to go in there and fix that with a couple of little bombs and a few little declarations is relatively foolish.
Governor Bush, Governor Bush.
Look, I think we're focusing on
hold on, Governor Bush, here's the question. You said getting rid of Saddam Hussein, in your words, was a pretty good deal. In light of what has happened in Iraq, do you still feel that way?
I do, and I think the lessons learned are that we have to have a strategy to get in and a strategy to get out, which means that you create a stable situation. This president, and this is what the focus ought to be, it's not the differences between us. It's Barack Obama does not believe Americans' leadership in the world is a force for good. He does not believe that our strength is a place where security can take place. He leads from behind. He creates an environment that now we're creating the most unstable situation we've had since the World War II era. The focus ought to be on the simple fact that Hillary Clinton wants to double down on a failed foreign policy, and we need to be united to defeat that, because we're going to be in a place that is far less secure than it is today.
You agree, Senator Paul? Senator Paul. Senator Paul. Was getting rid of Saddam Hussein a pretty good deal?
These are the fundamental questions of our time, these foreign policy questions, whether or not regime change is a good idea or a bad idea. I don't think because I think the regime change was a bad idea, it means that Hussein was necessarily a good idea. There's often variations of evil on both sides of the war. What we have to decide is whether or not regime change is a good idea. It's what the neoconservatives have wanted. It's what the vast majority of those on the stage want. They still want regime change. They want it in Syria. They wanted it in Iraq. They wanted it in Libya. It has not worked. Out of regime change, you get chaos. From the chaos, you've seen repeatedly the rise of radical Islam. So we get this profession of, oh my goodness, they want to do something about terrorism, and yet they're the problem because they allow terrorism to arise out of that chaos.
Thank you, Senator. Hugh Hewitt, go ahead.
Wolf, the question of whether we should be the question of whether we should be toppling dictatorships is asking the wrong question. We should be defeating our enemies. So the problem with defeating...
Senator, we're going to get to you. Wait your turn. We have 2 hours debate. We'll have plenty of time. Let Hugh ask his question.
Well, but let me explain. The focus
Senator,
should
please,
be on defeating our enemies. So, for example,
Senator,
a regime
you'll
we
have
should
plenty of
change
opportunity.
is
Hugh, go
Iran,
ahead.
because Iran
Go ahead, Hugh.
has declared war on us. But we shouldn't be toppling regimes that are fighting radical Islamic terrorists and that are helping.
These are the rules all of you agree to. Hugh, go ahead with your question.
Mr. Trump,
yes.
We are talking about the most important thing. That's why it's heated. And it's, you're okay with Mr. Assad staying in power, but you're also in favor of winning. If he stays in power, Iran is winning. Hezbollah is winning. Iran is winning in Yemen. They are winning everywhere. If they're winning, how can we be winning?
I think Assad is a bad guy, very bad guy, all right? Lots of people killed. I think we're backing people. We have no idea who they are. The rebels. We call them the rebels. The patriotic rebels. We have no idea. A lot of people think that they're ISIS. We have to do one thing at a time. We can't be fighting ISIS and fighting Assad. Assad is fighting ISIS. He's fighting ISIS. Russia's fighting now ISIS. And Iran is fighting ISIS. We have to do one thing at a time. We can't go, and I watched Lindsey Graham. He said, I've been here for 10 years fighting. Well, he'll be there with that thinking for another 50 years. He won't be able to solve the problem. We have to get rid of ISIS first. After we get rid of ISIS, we'll start thinking about it. But we can't be fighting Assad. And when you're fighting Assad, you're fighting Russia, you're fighting Iran, you're fighting a lot of different groups. But we can't be fighting everybody at one time.
Governor Christie, is he right? Because if we step back, Iran goes nuclear. Is Donald Trump right?
Well, I think we have to focus, Hugh, on exactly what the priorities are. And to me, what I've always said is that the president has set up an awful situation through his deal with Iran. Because what his deal with Iran has done is empowered them and enriched them. And that's the way ISIS has been created and formed here. ISIS is created and formed because of the abuse that Assad and his Iranian sponsors have rained down on the Sunnis in Syria. And so when we empower Iran, this is why this president, and when Hillary Clinton says her theory against ISIS will be just about the same as the president, then get ready for more unrest and more murder and more violence in the Middle East. We need to focus our attention on Iran, because if you miss Iran, you're not going to get ISIS. The two are inextricably connected because one causes the other.
Senator Paul, let me ask you, you heard Governor Kasich say Assad must go. Do you agree?
No, I think it's a huge mistake. I think regime change in Syria, and this is what I've been saying this for several years now. In 2013, when we first went in, I said, you're going to give arms to the allies of al-Qaeda, to radical jihadists? That's crazy. But the other thing I said is the great irony is you'll be back fighting against your own weapons. Had Assad been bombed when he used chemical weapons 2 years ago, ISIS would be in charge of all of Syria now. We have to have a more realistic foreign policy and not a utopian one where we say, oh, we're going to spread freedom and democracy and everybody in the Middle East is going to love us.
Governor
They're not
Kasich,
going to love us.
a huge mistake.
Look, in foreign policy, you have to know how to pick and choose. There's no way, if Saddam had not had weapons of mass destruction, I would have gone. Because I don't believe that U.S. should be involved directly in civil wars. I opposed the U.S. involvement in Lebanon. We ended up having to withdraw our Marines after our barracks were blown up. There's a difference between Iraq, where you have Sunni, Shia, and Kurds put together after First World War by the Western powers. It doesn't work. It needs to break up into three parts. And finally, in regard to Syria, understand that Assad is an ally of Iran who wants to extend that Shia radicalism all the way across the Middle East. He has to go. And for the Russians, frankly, it's time that we punch the Russians in the nose. They've gotten away with too much in this world, and we need to stand up against them, not just there, but also in Eastern Europe, where they threaten some of our most precious allies.
Let's continue with right now. We have another question from Facebook. Listen and watch.
My name is Ashley Toffel. Ms. Fiorina, in November you said that you would not talk to Vladimir Putin after you were elected because you would be communicating from a position of weakness. Do you believe that it is feasible to not communicate with another world leader, and do you think that that also is a sign of weakness?
Ms. Fiorina, as you know, U.S. and Russian warplanes, they're flying all over Syria right now. With so many lives on the line, is this a good time for the United States not to talk to Putin?
I didn't say I would cut off all communication with Putin. What I said was, as President of the United States, now is not the time to talk with him. Reagan walked away at Reykjavik. There is a time and a place for everything. There is a time and a place for talk, and there is a time and a place for action. I know Vladimir Putin. He respects strength. He lied to our president's face, didn't bother to tell him about warplanes and troops going into Syria. We need to speak to him from a position of strength. So as Commander-in-Chief, I will not speak to him until we've set up that no-fly zone, until we've gathered our Sunni Arab allies and begun to deny ISIS territory, until I've called the Supreme Leader of Iran and told him, New Deal. New Deal, we, the United States of America, are going to cut off the money flow, which we can do, which we don't need anyone's permission or collaboration to do. And I will not speak to him personally until we've rebuilt the Sixth Fleet a little bit right under his nose, rebuilt the missile defense program in Poland right under his nose, and conducted a few military exercises in the Baltic states. And let us remember one other thing. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are responsible for the growth of ISIS because they precipitously withdrew from Iraq in 2011 against the advice of every single general and for political expediency. It's not these people up here. It's Hillary Clinton.
Thank you, Ms. Fiorina. Governor Christie, if the U.S. imposed a no-fly zone over Syria and a Russian plane invaded that no-fly zone, would you be prepared to shoot down that Russian plane and risk war with Russia?
Not only are we prepared to do it, I would do it. A no-fly zone means a no-fly zone. Wolf, that's what it means. See, maybe because I'm from New Jersey, I just have this kind of plain language hang-up, but I would make very clear I would not talk to Vladimir Putin. In fact, I would talk to Vladimir Putin a lot. And I would say to him, listen, Mr. President, there's a no-fly zone in Syria. You fly in, it applies to you. And yes, we would shoot down the planes of Russian pilots if, in fact, they were stupid enough to think that this president was the same feckless weakling that the president we have in the Oval Office is right now.
Senator Paul. Senator Paul, I want you to respond to what we just heard from Governor Christie. If there was a no-fly zone, you say that potentially could lead to World War III. Why?
Well, I think if you're in favor of World War III, you have your candidate. You know, here's the thing. My goodness, what we want in a leader is someone with judgment, not someone who is so reckless as to stand on the stage and say, yes, I'm jumping up and down. I'm going to shoot down Russian planes. Russia already flies in that airspace. It may or may not be something